Lily was both fascinated and scared by the discovery of the eggs under her bed. She had no idea what kind of eggs they were and where they had come from. She decided to call an expert to identify them. After a few phone calls, she finally found an expert who agreed to come over and take a look. The expert arrived shortly and examined the eggs carefully. As he inspected them, his face turned pale and his eyes widened with horror. Then he said, "These are not ordinary eggs. We need to evacuate your house." This was dead serious, and it was in their best interest to leave as quickly as they could. But what was so dangerous about these strange-looking eggs? Why was the expert in such a panic, and why did they leave the house instantly? But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Like any other young girl, Lily was afraid of what may or may not live under her bed. For that reason, she checked under her bed every morning. And so also this Sunday morning when she suddenly saw several incredibly strange eggs. She didn't know what hit her, and this was just the beginning. Lily was shocked and immediately ran downstairs. She yelled for her parents, who didn't respond at first. When she finally got their attention, she told her parents about the eggs. They didn't believe her at first, but when they saw the fear in her eyes, they went upstairs with her. And now it wasn't just Lily who was in shock. Her parents, Oscar and Hilly, were also shocked by now. They asked Lily if she really didn't put them there herself, but immediately saw that she was innocent. Oscar and Hilly decided to call an expert, not only to reassure Lily, but also to have the eggs removed as soon as possible. The expert stepped courageously into the room and carefully looked under the bed with a flashlight. Without saying anything, he looked under the bed for several minutes while the family waited in suspense. The expert was screaming in horror. He had just been so quiet and concentrated at work, and now suddenly screamed as if he were facing his greatest fear. What could there be? And why would the expert scream like that? But the expert didn't get up. He stayed on the ground and double-checked everything, leaving Oscar and Lily in the dark. Oscar wondered what could be going on. He was slowly losing his patience because if it was really that bad, he needed to know immediately. But he couldn't just ask the expert, or could he? The expert finally rose off the ground, but avoided eye contact with the family. This is absurd, Oscar thought. He lost his temper and walked over, demanding that he at least say what he saw and what made him scream. But the expert walked away, snapping at Oscar. "I need backup! Leave me alone!" But this only raised more questions on Oscar's side. Hilly joined now too. She was a bit calmer than Oscar and kindly asked the expert what was going on and if they could help. The expert responded better to this. He clearly made an effort to speak to the parents, looking worriedly in Lily's direction. Were these eggs really that unusual or dangerous? Meanwhile, the expert got in touch with his backup. He tried to explain everything well to them, but it seemed like he had to repeat himself several times. That could only mean that his backup didn't understand much of it either. Finally, the expert hung up, waiting for the backup to come their way. Oscar, Hilly, and Lily were asked to wait in the living room until the backup arrived. They hesitantly obliged, but they wondered what the expert actually meant by backup. Did he ring his boss? Not much later, the backup actually arrived. It was a whole team. They hardly paid attention to the family and only briefly nodded to little Lily. They went straight to Lily's bedroom, where they carefully began to lift the bed away. The operation had begun, and it wasn't an easy one. Some of them left with samples of the eggs, and others stayed and taped off Lily's room. No one was allowed in anymore, which left Oscar, Hilly, and Lily with a dreadful feeling. They all knew now that there was something strange about these eggs, but still, no one was explaining to them what it was. Eventually, the team decided to call the police. Oscar was shocked. Was it that bad? Meanwhile, the police officer in charge arrived. He looked around the room with a serious face and had an obligatory chat with Oscar and Hilly. Unfortunately, he had little to say and tried to reassure them with empty words. Soon after, he joined the other agents and experts. Then Oscar saw a strange reaction on one of the faces of the officers. Because of this, Oscar ran out of patience, and he joined the group. The officers immediately stopped whispering, but Oscar didn't care. He demanded an explanation. Oscar had no idea why he was ordered to lie on the ground, but he wasn't in a position to deny an order. So, he slowly put his hands in the air and got down on his knees. Was Oscar being arrested? Why would they do something like that? Police said they could be infected with something. No way! Oscar couldn't believe his eyes, but then, all of a sudden, he saw his little Lily crying outside of their house. But Oscar was immediately shoved to the ground. However, Lily was taken under arms by a somewhat normal cop who treated her sweetly, and Oscar was relieved about that. Then Oscar was put into a police car, and they also put Lily and his wife Hilly into another police car, but all separated. What is going on? After a few minutes, Oscar noticed a large team approaching in white suits and entering the house. Hours passed before anyone approached Oscar, leaving him to wonder what was happening. Finally, someone came to Oscar and informed him, "We need to take you and your family with us, sir." What the heck? As the car drove away, Oscar noticed that the driver was not a police officer, but rather a person in a white suit. After a 2-hour drive, they arrived at their destination, which was an airport. Oscar was confused, wondering what was happening. Suddenly, he was escorted onto a waiting helicopter and taken away. Suddenly, a man spoke up. "We're almost there, just 5 minutes away." Soon after, Oscar arrived at a base camp that seemed like a military camp. But there was something different about it. What could this place be, and why was he brought here? As soon as the helicopter landed, another team of white-suited people arrived and grabbed Oscar by the arms. They whisked him away into a nearby building, where they locked him up in a cell. 2 hours later, a man entered Oscar's cell, again fully packed with a white suit. He introduced himself as Alex, who claimed to work for a secret forces team. He apologized for the situation, but insisted their actions had been necessary. Oscar demanded answers, but Alex remained mysterious about it. Oscar's first concern was for his family, especially his daughter Lily. Before Alex could say something else, Oscar aggressively demanded to know where they were taken. He sighed, looked at the ground, and said, "I have to tell you something." Oscar's heart raced as the words sunk in. He yelled, "What? What? What?" Was something happening to Lily? He struggled to compose himself, feeling his pulse throb in his temples. Alex handed Oscar a glass of water, calming him down as he struggled to regain his composure. Then Alex's words hung in the air like a heavy fog. "It's about your daughter." Alex's voice was grave as he told Oscar that he needed to regain his composure. His daughter had fallen seriously ill after they had arrived at the facility. It was probably the eggs, Alex explained, his face etched with worry. But what did that mean? Oscar's mind was racing with questions as he tried to process the news about his daughter's sudden illness. What kind of eggs could give his daughter such a bad reaction? Was she really sick? And if so, how serious was it? The uncertainty was suffocating, and he longed for answers. Alex remained evasive about the virus, insisting it was top secret. Oscar's priority was his daughter, and he wanted to see her immediately. However, Alex informed him that it was only possible after he had been tested for the virus himself. Oscar was anxious and afraid, but he had no choice but to agree. Another man entered the room and conducted a few tests on Oscar. A long and dreadful hour later, they received the results, and thankfully, Oscar was not infected with the virus. Alex explained to Oscar he had to go through some protocols. He wasn't allowed to touch his daughter and had to wear a hazmat suit like everyone else. They told him his wife, Hilly, was still waiting on the test results, and if she were to be negative too, she would be joining him in their daughter's room. As Oscar walked down the long hallway, He bombarded Alex with questions, desperate for answers. What was the origin of the virus? Did it come from the mysterious eggs? What kind of creature could possibly reside within them? Alex remained evasive, cautioning Oscar that some things were better left unsaid. After several minutes of silence, Alex finally opened up a bit. I can't reveal everything to you, but since your daughter is severely affected, I'll give you some information. Oscar's heart raced as he tried to piece together the puzzle. But before I tell you more, we need to run some tests to be sure, Alex said, leading Oscar to his daughter's room. We're doing everything we can to help her. Are you ready to see her? Oscar waited for a few seconds. As Oscar walked into the room, he was struck with disbelief at the sight of his daughter lying in bed, looking utterly drained and deathly pale. Alex continued, "This virus is fairly new, and there have only been 3 cases known in the world." Alex suggested that if Oscar's blood was given to his daughter, her blood cells might adjust with his good blood cells, and it could possibly help save her. Without hesitation, Oscar agreed to do the blood transfusion and took a seat for the procedure. After they successfully filled the bag with Oscar's blood, they entered Lily's room and hung the bag of blood to let it drip into her veins. Oscar sat by her bedside and looked at his daughter. How could it get like this so quickly? He thought to himself. Finally, Hilly arrived. She wore a white suit, just like the rest, but her presence meant she tested negative for the virus as well, and that was reassuring. Oscar hugged his wife tightly, and they sat down next to their daughter, telling her encouraging words without even being sure she could hear them. After a few minutes, Alex and the other experts left the room, but Oscar wasn't done yet, so he followed them. Oscar was eager to know more about the eggs, and Alex finally agreed to tell him everything. But on one condition, he had to sign a contract promising not to divulge the information to anyone. And without hesitation, Oscar immediately agreed. Alex began to reveal information about the mysterious eggs and the virus they carried, but Oscar sensed there was more to the story. He wondered what other secrets were being kept from him, and would he regret signing this contract? Oscar was stunned as Alex revealed that the virus came from the eggs of a strange creature, possibly extraterrestrial. He couldn't comprehend how it could have ended up in Lily's room. Oscar's disbelief turned into acceptance as he trusted the credibility of the contract he signed. With his mind now focused on his daughter, he asked for an update on her condition. "What is going on with my daughter? Is she doing better?" he asked anxiously, hoping for some positive news. And the doctors had good news for him. Lily was doing a lot better. Oscar was immensely relieved to learn that the blood transfusion had worked, as his daughter had finally woken up from her deep sleep. He asked Alex if he could see her, eager to be reunited with his little girl. They embraced, and Lily asked what had happened. Hilly and Oscar stayed with their daughter to keep her feeling safe. The next day, they asked if they could finally go home, but Alex told them that was a difficult situation because their house was still in lockdown and needed to be thoroughly cleaned. Instead, they provided a temporary home for Oscar and his family where they could stay until it was time for them to go home.